Hello, sir. You are muted, so I can't hear you.
Okay, good morning. We students are joining actually, so we'll start in another 5 minutes time. Okay.
Yes, sir, absolutely, no problem.
Yeah,
Is it a
please begin.
holiday in India for Good Friday, or other classes
Yes,
still going on?
it's a holiday.
Oh.
So it was supposed to be scheduled tomorrow actually, Saturday, but Saturday they are having other timetable going on as usual. So I have my session from 10 to 11 tomorrow. So plan was to conduct your session tomorrow at 10,
Mm-hmm.
but we have preponed it. So I asked students, they said yes, we can go on with it. So it has been planned today.
Yeah, like even if it's a holiday, there are like a bunch of people in here. Like, good to see that. I
Yes,
almost
there.
forgot it was a holiday. One of my friends actually reminded me about it.
Yeah, it's a holiday, but they're a good bunch of people. So interested in all these things. They're attending lectures sincerely. Let's see how strong it goes in coming 2 3 months.
Yes, I'm
So
sure they'll do
only
well.
the corona scare and all these things are a little less here. So it's good to see all the students here in college every day. That's a good thing. But Mumbai again is locked down. That is one
Yes.
thing.
Yeah,
And
my mom was complaining about it. She was like, okay, the cases are increasing again. So I don't think, even she'll be able to come over. She was actually supposed to come for graduation, but then because of the COVID cases increasing again,
correct,
they
correct.
even cancelled her visa appointment. So that's not going to happen, at least this year.
Difficult things are again getting difficult. So March and April there is a huge upsurge of case. So things are a little difficult now. Let's
Yeah.
see how long this surge goes, and let's hope it ends soon. What's the status here, there in your state?
People have become even more complacent than before over here. Like they already did not care about the virus to begin with, and you had to literally force people to wear masks. But now that vaccines are being rolled out, they've become even more careless. So, but yeah, the vaccines have been rolled out pretty fast. In fact, I'm getting mine next. So, yeah, hopefully it will be under control, but it looks pretty glum because, like the rules are not being followed that well.
And last 1 month, what is the status? Like it increased or again it is constant, or how is it going last 1 month?
It's constant, but I think in the next 2 weeks it will increase drastically because spring break is coming up over here. So spring break is where like we have an entire week of holidays in between just to enjoy the summer. And that is the time where a lot of people come to Florida for like chilling on the beach. And it's going to spike up exponentially because they are going to travel no matter what.
Okay. So only thing I can say is take care, take precautions and other thing. So in case any.
Yes, we have to. There's no other choice.
See, I have got these people back on campus almost after 1.5 year, almost 1 year. So again, it should not go back into that lockdown mode. That would be very bad. At least
Yeah,
here I'm
even
talking.
my
So
university was talking about opening up for next semester, but it depends on how well people are following the rules and how many cases are there at that time. But we opened up something called as the bull market at my university again. So bull market is where like it's a small exhibition every single week which happens on a campus. They had not done for a year because of COVID, but yeah, I think since the last 2 weeks they have started again.
that's good. That's good. Because college without students and campus, empty campus is horrific actually. September, uh, we are going to institute from September onwards, and
Mm.
those 3 4 months were very difficult. Only we are there, no students. Online classes, academics were going on, but without students, the college looks really glum. That was a problem.
Yeah, I understand because I was still going to the lab even during COVID because I had to complete my thesis. It was like a complete ghost town because USF
That is
campus itself is very big, and you keep walking in the campus and you don't see a single person, and you're like, okay, is it even open? Are people even here?
that is true. And the same place, when it looks different, it really gives you a setback. Because we have seen institutes, it's always throbbing and all, and suddenly because of pandemic and all, it is empty, totally nobody there. So that's a difficult thing.
Yeah, I
Anyways,
agree.
I guess the worst is past. Again, there is another surge we have to fight again. So telling everybody to be careful and all. So it's time. Shall we start?
Yes, sir, we can definitely start.
So actually, I had sent your short CV. I had sent it yesterday. So we are officially starting. So you please be there. So good morning, all the students. We are having almost 33 people here. So as it's time, we can start. So let me tell you, she is a Sanskrita is a student of electrical engineering. So she was having her interest in UG days in control system as well. So now she is a control system engineer, electrical engineer, and she has worked in battery management system. So her MS thesis is focused on the thermal management of lithium-ion batteries using supercapacitors, and the applications for the developed system includes motor vehicles, scooters, and mobile phones. So as we are EHV people, electrical and hybrid vehicles, so whatever work she has done that she's going to discuss in coming 1 hour is going to be helpful for our purpose. And Sanskrit was a part of Collins Aerospace team for summer 2020 to develop a power line communication model. So there is something called as power line communication system. I'll let you know what about it in the next class. So she has worked in power line communication model for legacy aircrafts like Boeing 767 and Airbus 350 using the Ethernet. So the main objective was to reduce the overall wiring cost. So she is eagerly looking forward to for a great session in EHP with EP class. So I'm handing over to Ms. Sanskrita. So please take up and you please start your session. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, before I start, I'm just going to present my screen so that I can
Yes, please.
yeah, share my presentation. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and I'm so glad to see all of you here. That too on a holiday. It's really surprising. But yeah, like I said, good to have you here. Uh, Professor already gave a little background about what I've done. So I did my bachelor's in from Vidyalankar Institute of Technology, and I'm now a master's student. I'm actually graduating this May. But yeah, I did my master's from University of South Florida. We are here to talk a little about batteries that are used in electric vehicles and more specifically lithium ion batteries in general because that's what is being used in electric vehicles like majority nowadays. So, brief introduction into why we need electric vehicles in the first place is because as we see that the reserves of fossil fuels as well as perishable energy are reducing by the day. And because these perishable energy resources are not going to last forever, so it is our responsibility to move towards renewable energy resources. We have already seen a bunch of these renewable energy resources in our everyday lives as well. You know, incandescent tube lights were replaced by LEDs, And I think even in construction now, solar cells have almost become a standard. So in that sense, lithium-ion batteries have been a game changer, and it has had such a huge impact when it comes to renewable energy. Majority of the lithium-ion batteries that are manufactured are usually used in applications such as electric vehicles, electric buses, and trains. But that's not to say that it's not used in other applications as well. So why is lithium ion used? Because lithium ion has a very high, power density. So it is perfect for applications such as electric vehicles. And also the drop in like the manufacturing cost of lithium ion batteries is a huge positive point as well. In fact, it dropped from almost like $350 per kilogram to $100 per kilogram, which is a huge drop. So because of this, electric vehicles are not just a luxury of the past, but it's something even common people can afford right now. The sales of electric vehicle have also increased drastically. In fact, not last year, but in 2019, it took up almost like 2.6% of like global car sales. And as compared to 2018, there was almost a 40% increase in electric vehicle sales in 2019. So, what are lithium-ion batteries? We'll just go over a brief introduction into the lithium-ion batteries. So, these are rechargeable batteries. So, the anode of the lithium-ion batteries is made out of graphite, and the cathode of the lithium-ion batteries is made of a metal oxide, let's say lithium cobalt oxide. And the electrolyte is usually a lithium salt. The reactions that take place within the battery itself so that it can provide the power is actually a oxidation half reaction, and this half reaction is reversible, so which is why lithium ion batteries can be charged again and again. In fact, lithium ion batteries have a life cycle of almost like 1,000 cycles. That means, like, you can charge and recharge the battery for 1,000 times. Good quality batteries will last even longer than that. But like the batteries, or rather the material which is being used inside these batteries, is extremely reactive. In fact, lithium itself is a highly reactive material. So we need to make sure that when we are handling lithium ion batteries, we do that efficiently. There is a lot of research which is being done, and that is concerning improving the safety, reducing its cost, extending the life, and also the energy density. So there are multiple types of lithium ion batteries as well. When I say types, I generally mean like the packaging of the battery and what form they come in. So prismatic type of lithium ion batteries is where the anode and the cathode are in the form of a sheet, and these sheets are placed on top of each other with a separation or a separator in between them. We usually see these type of prismatic batteries in mobile phones. You've seen those like small, almost like a brick-like battery. Those are the prismatic cells, and the housing, or as it is called, is actually the outer covering of the battery. It can be metallic casing also, but most of the time, especially in like the commercial like prismatic batteries that we see, it's usually hard plastic and not metallic casing. Then next are pouch batteries. It's literally like the name says. It's like a pouch, and they are like foil tabs in between, or it looks like an electrode itself, and it's like in this pouch, and what happens in pouch batteries and why it is not being used often is because when you charge and discharge the pouch batteries, gases tend to release in it, and these gases expand the battery itself. So when the pouch starts expanding, it becomes a safety hazard. And so although there is, its efficiency is being increased nowadays, it finds its applications in like very few industries. The most common type of battery is the one which is shown in the picture on the right. That is the cylindrical lithium ion batteries. These cylindrical lithium ion batteries are used in electric vehicles. They are easy to manufacture and they have really good stability. In fact, the code that is there, you can see on the image on the right, the NCR 18650B. This battery is like exactly the one that Tesla used in its, like, I think Model S cars. And it Tesla used like 7,100 or like 300 approximately cells of this battery, and it was like connected in like various series parallel connections. So you can see the entire chassis of the Tesla model covered in these small batteries. So different batteries or like different manufacturers or different electric vehicle manufacturers have different specifications for the kind of battery they are using. And depending on the battery that they use, depends and that will determine how far or how long the car is going to ride. So, the Chevy Bolt, it's actually a hybrid electric vehicle, and that uses a lithium manganese battery. So, it has a rating of 16,000 kilowatt hours, and it goes only for like 40 miles. That's not really much actually, but this was like a really old model, and as compared to the Tesla S or the Tesla 3, which goes for 265 to 310 miles. It's a huge jump when it comes to the mileage of the batteries itself. So one of the, at least in the past, if you see even a couple of years back, these electric vehicles could not travel much. People actually preferred not buying electric vehicles because they felt like it's good only for traveling within the cities where you're going to get a charging plug. But since that changing nowadays, and you can go much more longer distances with the batteries which are being developed now, a lot of people are actually opting for electric vehicles because uh, as compared to fuel prices which go up and down every single day, the charging of the electric vehicles is much cheaper and much more durable. Let's see a short video on the kind of battery that Tesla is doing and the future of battery is when it comes to like Tesla at least.
Audio is not audible, Sanskrita.
Oh, one second.
Yeah, now we can hear it.
Oh, is it not audible?
Now play it. Please play it now. Yeah, now not audible.
What about now? Was it audible then?
No, you just play it now first.
Okay.
No, audio is not audible. It had come, but again it's gone.
Is it not visible?
Visible
Or like is
is
the,
okay.
yeah, what
Audio
about the
part,
audio?
yeah, audio part. It had come just for a brief 1 2 second and is gone now.
Oh, okay, I'll try playing it on YouTube itself. Uh, Give me a moment. Uh,
Yeah,
Let me
take your
try
time.
and get that from YouTube. Sorry about that. So I'm going to play it again. Please let me know if the audio is fine right now. Can you hear the audio now?
No, audio is not there. Can you just turn up the volume in your laptop? That may be the cause.
It's already on maximum volume.
Okay.
So,
So is it possible that whatever thing the fellow is showing, can you explain
mm,
it from your slide
yeah.
only? You can do that.
Okay. So, what was basically being said in that particular video is that Tesla is actually working on increasing the energy density of the batteries which are already there. Like I said, they were using the 18650 battery, the green ones that I showed in the previous slide, but they are trying to make those batteries bigger. Uh, so what happens when you make the battery bigger is you're basically increasing the power density of the battery. Tesla wants to increase the mileage of the battery. They are aiming for almost 600 miles in a single charge. So what it means is like when you charge the battery once, you don't have to charge it again for almost 600 miles. And 600 miles is a lot if you see, 1 mile is 1.8 kilometers. So 600 into 1.8 kilometers. That is how much Tesla is aiming
And 1,000
for the
kilometers
batteries.
it is.
Yeah, close to 1,000.
Yeah. So you
So
can play this video and you can just show us the video first, and later you can just give us a brief what the video talked about. At least let us
o-
have the visual.
okay, yes. So as we can see from the video over here, I just paused it for a minute. So the 18650. So this is the one on the left is what they were using until now. And the 2170 is what they started in back in 2017. Although it's not like 100% in use India models right now because they are still testing because 50% increase in energy density is a lot. But yeah, I think they were already saying that they will start to use these newly manufactured and improved batteries in their later car models. Hmm. So I'll
Yes, what is this part being shown?
pardon.
What is this part which is being shown now on screen?
Yeah. So, what they're showing over here is they said before, they had separator tabs in between. So it had like a jelly roll and a separator tab. This is the top view of the battery, and basically these are new batteries which are separate from the 2170 shown before, and these will have no separator tabs in between. So like they said, like 5 times reduction in electrical part. So by reducing the number of parts used in the construction of the battery also, they are trying to make it more like have what to say, more material of the anode and cathode. So,
Okay.
a lot of people are actually saying that this makes the battery extremely susceptible to heat changes, and it's not safe in a way because the separator tabs are there for a reason. And Tesla eliminating it is definitely a huge safety issue. But yeah, Tesla is so confident in its battery management system that they are like, no, we know that we can handle this type of increase in heat, so we are going to remove the separator tab because we have faith in our thermal management. So that's a big
What
risk.
one question is, what does exactly the separator do in the battery?
Okay. What the separator does is it's actually like a tab which is there at the top. So when the gases increase in the battery, or rather when the heat generation in the battery increases, there are like gases which are being generated. So once the internal temperature of the battery increases up to a certain limit, the tab actually presses down, and it blocks the flow of ions from the anode to the cathode.
Okay.
So that way it ensures that the two parts are like completely shut off from one another, so there is no conduction in energy. And they what they're trying to do is like completely shut off the battery so that the heat does not increase. It's a safety precaution that all commercial batteries have to take, and this is something Tesla is actually, I don't know, trying to get rid of.
So is it something like it is just coming down? It is separating the all the reaction agents, reaction elements, and it is stopping the reaction and giving some cooling of time to the battery.
Yes, but one of the things is like it's not really giving cooling time, because once the separator tab like presses, it's you can't really get that back up unless you take it to the manufacturer itself. It's kind of irreversible. But at the same time, it's a necessary safety precaution.
So it's
So
avoiding the accidents.
yes, avoiding accidents, because a couple of years back itself, there was an incident of electric vehicles blowing up, where we'll get to that later in the later slides. Uh,
Okay.
but like they develop their technology pretty fast when it comes to battery management systems. So it's a leap of faith they are taking, but I don't know, they seem pretty confident.
So Tesla is completely removing this separator thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. Please go forward. Thank you.
That's what I wanted to get. Like that was the main point of this video, like the cell design and what they're trying to do.
Correct.
I'll try to move towards the other slides and explain more about the battery and why like these safety precautions matter in the first place.
Correct. Correct. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So, past accidents. We all remember, those articles in the newspaper, like just like 4 5 years back in 2016, how Samsung Galaxy Note 7s were blowing up in like people's houses because they put the phone to charge. And also, like another case of like Toyota, what is it, plug-in electric vehicle model, the Prius model, blew up after getting their battery replaced. Why are these batteries blowing up in the first place? Is because of poor thermal management. So when the temperature of the battery increases, so it can increase exponentially. And if the battery management system is not able to keep up with it, the battery is definitely going to blow. In fact, Samsung had to recall all of its Galaxy Note 7, and they faced $1 billion of loss because of this. And it was a major hit on their reputation as well. So, the one on the right that we see the image, it's actually of a Tesla and not the Prius. So this is what had happened, I think, almost like in 2018 itself. So a car blew up, but Tesla's like thermal management, or rather the heat resistance of the battery was so good that although a part of it blew up, it did not affect the rest of the batteries, which was actually good because the user was actually present in the car when this happened, and nothing happened to him. So, if they are able to, contain such a high blast, what to say, blast of such a high magnitude, then I think we can understand why they have reasons to believe in their battery management system that well. So, yeah, let's go to, what exactly is a battery management system. So the battery management system is a major part of the electric vehicle. It is this system which makes sure that the battery is functioning properly. It makes sure that the battery does not overcharge as well as over discharge. So when a battery over discharges, then it's extremely difficult to get it back to its original capacity, and over discharging like severely reduces the remaining useful life of the battery. You cannot like use it for as much time you could use it before. So over discharge and overcharging, we all know if you charge it too much, it is going to blow up. So the battery management system makes sure that it does not happen, and the battery is operating within the safety limits, which are they have to maintain certain standards when they are building an electric vehicle. And one of the key responsibilities of the battery management system is that it has to control the temperature of the battery. And
Right.
the part of the battery management system which is responsible for controlling the temperature is the thermal management system. What the thermal management system does, it cools down the battery, and it ensures that the maximum temperature of the battery does not increase beyond critical limits, because once it increases, then yeah, it can blow up. So it, and the in not like increasing the temperature of the battery also means that you're improving the stability of the battery. So
Right.
improving the stability and like preventing premature failure. There are many different methods to cool down the battery, and there are like methods like air cooling, liquid cooling, which we'll just go over in a second. But the most widely used method when it comes to electric vehicles is that of forced convection air cooling. So forced convection air cooling is where there's a fan, and you're just blowing air from it, from the outside through the vents. So that's what forced convection air cooling means. Okay. So what is thermal runaway? Now this is what a proper or an ideal thermal management system should be able to avoid. So thermal runaway is where the temperature of the battery increases exponentially. So okay, now we know that there are certain what to say, chemical reactions going on inside the battery, right? And these chemical reactions are exothermic in nature. So, if since they are exothermic in nature, it will increase the reaction rate because heat is being generated. Since heat is being generated, it will again give rise to even more exothermic reaction. Then the reaction rate increases, and it's a constant loop. And this loop is that of like a positive feedback, an uncontrolled positive feedback actually. So
Right.
this will increase the temperature exponentially. You see the curve of the battery, it has almost a linear increase, but once it goes into thermal runway, the temperature of the battery is going to increase exponentially. In fact, the internal temperature of the battery can even go up to almost 150 or 200 degrees Celsius, and that is enough to explode it. And that is what a thermal management system should be able to avoid. Actually, in most cases, if you don't take care for a thermal runway, even the battery, like even if it does not explode, you cannot get it back to functioning properly. It is completely irreversible in a lot of cases if it is uncontrolled. So we'll go over a couple of thermal management methods which are being used, or rather, like topics in which research is being done. One is that was of liquid cooling unit using mini channel cold plates. So these cold plates are, like the name suggests, cold like metal plates which are placed like between the batteries, and between these cold plates they use a liquid. So the liquid is where the majority of the heat from the battery is absorbed into, and the mini channel, like we said, so the cold plates will be responsible for reducing the temperature of the battery itself. Another method is, where we are changing the characteristics of the battery itself. So like I said, like the cathode or like the electrodes basically are responsible for heat generation. So what Mr. Zhao suggested is that if we reduce the diameter of the electrode, then the internal heat generation should reduce as well. And he was right. It actually does reduce internal heat generation. But the major disadvantages for changing battery characteristics is that one, the power density reduces because you're reducing the diameter of the electrodes, and secondly, it is extremely difficult to manufacture. If you're changing battery characteristics which are not like as per commercial specifications, then you definitely have to like pump in a lot of money to like manufacture those custom batteries, which is not something feasible at all. And the last method which we will go through is that of heat pipes. Heat pipes are actually pretty interesting, if you ask me, because they have two different sections. One is that one section is touching the battery, or touching the hot part of the battery, and the other one is where the liquid which is there in the heat pipes, it goes to cool down. So this liquid is first in contact with the battery, whose like temperature is increasing. Because of the increase in temperature, the liquid, it vaporizes, and it goes to the all the way to the other end of the pipe, and it condenses. And because of what to say, because of the mechanism inside it, it comes back, and the process repeats until the temperature of the battery reduces.
Correct.
So why do, if like all of these thermal management systems are already there, then why do we need another solution? What novel solution did my thesis provide that I had to work on it and actually come up with it? Why are we using supercapacitors in the first place? So let's go back to this image. So most of these thermal management systems which are there, they're trying to cool the battery after the battery is already heating up. What we are trying to do using supercapacitors is that we don't want the battery to heat up in the first place. That's so that
Uh,
we are,
can
yeah,
I
we are
can I
trying
just
to
can
reduce.
I just ask something?
Okay.
Please tell students something first about what is supercapacitor. They might not be knowing, and then you can continue with your explanation.
Mhm. Okay. Supercapacitors work just like a normal capacitor, but they have much higher charge storing capabilities. For example, we were trying to draw out almost zero point 0.2 amperes out of the supercapacitor, which we cannot do in a normal capacitor at all. It does not have that much charge storing capabilities. And also supercapacitors are uh, built different in the sense that they have two plates, and they have a separating like electrolytic solution in between.
Correct.
But when we apply a voltage, the ion moves towards both the plates instead of going from one plate to another, in like a traditional capacitor. That is why these supercapacitors are also called as electric, like double layered capacitors. Uh, it, did I
Correct,
explain it
accurate.
all right? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, in the thesis that I worked on, we developed a method which was switching between the battery and the supercapacitor. As we can see from the image on the right, we'll talk a little bit about parasitic power consumption. What exactly is parasitic power consumption? So, in electric vehicles, if the thermal management system has to work, it's a mechanical system, right? If that system has to work, it is drawing out power from the battery itself. So it's using the battery to cool the battery, which does not make sense. It's like we said, parasitic. It's not providing any charge back to the battery. In fact, it's just contributing more to the draining of the battery.
Correct.
What the supercapacitor does is, although it takes charge from the battery to charge itself, but when we start the switching, it's providing back all that charge back to the load. So in that way, whatever charge is being absorbed from the battery is also being delivered back. So the total power consumption remains the same. We are not whatever like the charge is there or whatever power is there is at the end of the day being delivered to the load and not being wasted in cooling down the battery. Although the supercapacitor does have that perfect effect. So
Correct.
before we go into the practical testing, we obviously have to verify or simulate if what we are thinking or whatever model we built is right or wrong. And for that, we developed a hypothesis. What the hypothesis says that let's say the internal heat generation, or rather the power loss, is because of the internal resistance of the battery, right? And
Correct.
P is equal to I square R. So if we have to reduce I, then definitely the power loss which is there inside the battery should also reduce. Now, if we are reducing the current of like which is being taken from the battery, then we have to make up for it like in some way or the other, and that is being done by the supercapacitor. So once the temperature of the battery increases beyond a certain limit, the current which is being supplied by the battery to the load will reduce, and the deficit will be provided by the supercapacitor.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's what the whole working of this particular system is. And these are the results that we got from the practical testing of the hybrid battery and supercapacitor architecture. Uh, the first one, graph A, is where we are constantly discharging it. Here, there is no supercapacitor in play. It is just the battery directly connected to a load, and we are constantly draining it out at 2.2 amperes. So we can see that the maximum temperature reached by the battery is almost like what 42.3 degrees Celsius, and the discharge time is 73 minutes. Discharge time is basically for how long it was under the load. In
Okay.
73 minutes, the battery was completely discharged. And B, we are alternating it every 5 minutes. Alternating it every 5 minutes, as in from the battery to the supercapacitor. So we let the battery provide for 5 minutes, then we reduce the current.
Supercapacitor.
Then in that time, the supercapacitor is like giving back the current. So we are doing this switching every 5 minutes, and we can see that the temperature actually reduced by what 7 degrees, which to be honest is a lot. The maximum temperature fell almost to 35.4 degrees Celsius. And not just that, it was able to what to say, be under load for a longer period of time, which was 88 minutes.
Hmm.
And that increased even further when we started alternating it every 1 minute. So the maximum temperature was 31.69 degrees Celsius, and it was under load for 100 minutes. So what does this mean? Why why is this important? So let's say we were supposed to use this particular technique in an electric vehicle. So for the same battery, if you were, supposed to, if you were not switching between the battery and supercapacitor, you will be able to drive the car only for 73 minutes. But if you were switching between the supercapacitor and the battery like every 1 minute, not only will the maximum temperature be just like under 32 degrees, but at the same time, you'll be able to drive it even longer, like even for more time, for almost like 100 minutes, which for a single battery, because we were testing on a single battery. So I'm going to like these measurements are like for one single cell. So, and that is a lot, that is a huge increase.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
There are four devices shown: device 0, device 1, 2, and 3. What are they actually? Are they for
Oh,
different vehicles or something?
no, no, no. That's a good question. So, because we were trying to, study the thermal behavior of the battery, we placed four different sensors on the body of the battery. So, device one was towards the positive terminal of the battery, whereas device three was towards the negative terminal, and one, two were in between. So because the internal heat generation is not what to say constant throughout the battery.
Okay.
When we like as we can see from these graphs, there is more heat generated towards the positive terminal than towards the negative terminal.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually happens because uh, the charge flow inside the battery is from the negative to the positive terminal. So that is why we can see that like device 0 has a much higher value than device 3.
But in
But
the third
yeah,
graph, see, all are same. So temperature distribution is equal for all the sensors.
for
Because
the graph C,
graph C, yeah, coherence is much more. For graph 2, it
yes,
is, so temperature distribution is very scattered in case of B when you
hmm,
alter it for 5 minutes. But for C, it is too coherent. That means temperature distribution in all devices are kind of equal.
yes. And also, but one thing that we can see very clearly in actually graph B is this plateau from 60 minutes to 80 minutes. And that is something which clearly tells us about the performance of the hybrid battery capacitor model. Uh, Although we can see the same from the slopes of the graphs as well, but there's just something very beautiful about that plateau, because it is between this time when we start actually alternating the battery supercapacitor, and it's so evident in the testing itself. And and we haven't even developed like a full-fledged thermal management system. We are just testing the hybrid architecture, and we can already see the difference. So it only goes on to say that if we were supposed to develop this even further, it would actually be a huge success.
So a better
Mm-hmm.
characteristic you can find in case of C, that plateau you are talking about between 60 to 80.
Yeah, I mean, here obviously the rate of increase in temperature is much lower,
Yeah.
but that definite plateau is what to say, as we can see in B. But
It
yeah,
started
obviously
showing in
it's
B. It started showing in B, but it is perfect
mhm,
in C now.
yes.
Yes, correct.
Uh-huh.
That is correct.
So yeah, this is what to say, the star of my thesis and what I worked on for a year now.
Okay. So between that 60
So
to 80 minutes, whatever happened. Correct. Go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, let's move on to the kind of roles that are available when it comes to electric vehicles and automotive industry in general. So, towards the left, we can see all these different roles
I would like to
that
disturb. Is it only at US or in India also this is applicable? Whatever roles you are explaining.
I actually saw all these for India. I wasn't when I was like trying to prepare for this, I actually saw all these roles in India and not the US.
Very
So
good, correct.
in US, majority of the companies are actually Tesla, Ford, Fiat, General Electric, and General Motors. Whereas in India, it's actually Bosch, Eaton, Continental. Bosch and Continental are definitely the major players when it comes to automotive industries in general. But I think Tata Motors is coming up well and pretty fast. So, a lot of these jobs are actually designed for electrical engineers, but you need to know a little bit of mechanical. You need to know how a motor works and what kind of control systems are they using. Maybe they may even need you to know a little bit of embedded systems as well. So
Correct.
there are all sorts of roles. It actually depends on what you want to do. If you want to go like 100% into coding, sure, they have roles for that. If you want to go like 100% into like motor control, they have a different role for that. But at the end of the day, it is you who need to know like where you want to go to. But there are definitely opportunities. All these companies I have listed are in India, and if you guys want to go into electric vehicle or like the automotive industry, this is definitely something you guys can look it up.
Correct.
So, what are the skills that are required if you want to get hired into those sort of roles? The majority, I would say, is the top three or four skills, which is PLC programming, motor control using microcontrollers, MATLAB, Simulink, Python. Actually, you don't need to know all three of these languages like Python, C, C++. Even if you know only one single language, it is still fine. But if you want to get into automation, then PLC is 100% must. So, especially companies like Tesla won't even hire you if you don't know PLC. They are like very strict when it comes to that, and they need experience. But at the same time, getting internship in these companies is equally difficult, but it's not impossible. Autosar is a platform which is used for what to say, the state space, or rather, yeah, actually, the state space modeling for the electric vehicles. It is not that popular between students, but it is definitely helpful if you want to get into the automotive industry. PCB design is something, like I said again, if you want to get into the more embedded side of things, then that is where PCB design and power electronics comes in. Okay, so these are some of the projects that you can work on as a student, because as a student you don't really know much. You're like, okay, all these standards that the industry has. How are we going to know? What if we don't get an internship? Can we still apply to these jobs? Yes, you can still apply. An internship is not 100% compulsory, but it is highly recommended because it is a huge plus in your resume actually. These links, as well as these projects, is something I can share with you. I can share it with professor, and professor can share it with you guys. Like PLC motor control, state space modeling, and battery modeling. So battery modeling in this case, I would say, is the most complex project that you guys probably could work on. But you don't need to achieve everything that is there in that particular project, but you can actually dilute and simplify some things to make it more achievable, and try to work with your professors and your peers and see what you can do and what you cannot, so that you can go step by step into doing something like that. There is no need to get discouraged thinking that, oh my god, this is something too complex. It is not. If you go step by step, there is absolutely no reason why you cannot do something like this. Okay. So I'll briefly go over what I did in my internship. I did it last summer. I did a couple of internships in India as well. One was in Riddle. It was an incubation center in Mumbai, and the other one was in Radel Electronics. Just as a side note, if any of you guys want to do these sort of internships and you don't know who to reach out to, please drop in an email. I will be more than happy to help assist you with getting an internship or experience in any of these places. Okay, so enough of that. I'll just get into what I did in my internship. So I did my internship last summer at in Collins Aerospace, and this particular internship was designed actually solely for students. So we did a feasibility analysis of power line communications in aircrafts. So what they wanted to do is, instead of having like two separate wires, they wanted to have one single. So why do they have like two separate sets of wires? One is to power up all the modules in the aircraft, and the other one is so that they can send the communication signals. So they wanted to get rid of, the second set, and instead of that they wanted to use ethernet over powerline, so to send the communication signals for all the modules. The reason why they wanted to do this is, one, so that they can reduce the wiring cost, and second, to reduce the fuel cost as well. So you may like beg the question that why not go wireless? Why do they even want to use a power line for communications when you can definitely go wireless? But you cannot actually go 100% wireless in case of aircrafts, because they have to adhere to electrical standards like DO 160. What the DO 160 says, that it's basically a standard for the electromagnetic interference, that happens because of these wireless communication signals. So they have to keep that to a bare minimum.
Mm.
So which is why they opted for Ethernet over the power lines instead. uh, from the model that we built, or rather the feasibility analysis that we did, we were able to figure out a bandwidth which the Ethernet signals can be in, so that there is like minimum electromagnetic interference. And because of that, we were also able to like reduce the expense for like the wiring cost by 1 million for each aircraft every year. And if that is for each aircraft, that is a huge savings for the company itself. And I was actually in touch with my manager at Collins Aerospace, and he told me a couple of weeks back that this project is officially being put into practice, or rather, they are officially going to start working on this like in next month. Yeah, I think so. They gave it a go, and yes, so it's all good to go in a practical application, if you can say. So this is how a traditional aircraft on the left looks like. So you can see a lot of wires, very complicated. Definitely makes the aircraft very heavy also. So we want to get rid of all this wiring mess that goes on in there and keep it to a bare minimum, and make it like what it is on the right. The more recent models, that is the Boeing 787, is already a more electrical aircraft. So the solution that we worked on is more for traditional aircrafts like the Boeing 767 and the Airbus 350. So what kind of jobs, especially in India, are there in aerospace? So these organizations are the ones that hire like engineers for aerospace. And one of the things is that Some of you all may even want to come to the US for masters and stuff. And you may say that, oh, if she did something in aerospace, so why not me? But the thing is that if you want a full-time job in aerospace out of India, it is going to be very difficult because they hire only citizens. And I got that internship because it was like more for students, like it was like 100% student program, so they don't mind international student in such program, but full time is definitely more difficult. And they, unless you have a PhD or something in a very niche field, you can be like 98% sure that uh, at least outside India you won't get a job in aerospace. So if you want something which, if you want to do something in that, then India is where, it's like the perfect place for you because you don't have to struggle so much. But then again, getting these jobs is difficult because you have to give all these, high level difficulty exams like GATE and I don't know, any other exam maybe to get these kind of jobs. Uh, so in the end, what I'm going to try to do is persuade you towards a master's degree, which is what I did. And one of the reasons why I'm going to do that is to tell you the difference between the jobs that you would get if you were to do only a master's, or and what would happen if you do a master's degree, or like just be a bachelor's. So when you're just a bachelor and you get into the industry, they are going to give you like the most basic level tasks ever. They are not, you definitely won't be getting like design related jobs. You're like, oh, I want to design, this, I want to work on an interesting project. If you do a bachelor's, there is a very good chance you won't even get that opportunity. That is why they prefer people with a master's, especially when it comes to R&D and design. Even if it is not R&D, then a lot of like jobs actually prefer masters. So one of the main advantages of doing masters is that like all these niche roles, let's say in aerospace, or a lot of VLSI related jobs also, and they are more what to say, inclined to hire master students. And not to mention that the starting salary of a master student is higher than that of a bachelor student. Now let's say that you decide that, okay, I'm going to do a masters, but your friend decides to just do a bachelor's and go into the industry. Let's say he is earning a certain salary per year, and after what to say, your masters, you get the same salary that he's getting because he got promoted in those 2 years. Now you may wonder, oh, if I did masters and this dude who just did bachelors had to get the same salary, then why did I have to work so hard, right? But because now let's say because your starting salary is much higher, let's say, and he's still at let's say $40,000 per year, whereas you're at $60,000 per year, and both of you all get a 10% increase in your salary. Obviously, that 10% is higher for a $60,000 per year person and much lower for a $40,000 per year person. So that is where the difference in your salary actually starts to reflect. And I'm not going to lie, but money does make a difference, and it definitely makes your life much easier. In fact, why are you studying, like why are you working hard in the first place? To earn money, right? So I would definitely encourage you all to think about masters now itself. If any of you guys are already preparing, or want to know what it is like to pursue a master's, what things you all should take into consideration, definitely reach out to your professors and reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to help you.
So
So,
question is, okay, okay, fine.
mhm.
So I'll leave it to students first. It's a very you have touched many things in your talk. So you started with the initial part, then battery management, then the present state of the art in Collins, and finally about MS and why you should go for masters. So any
Mhm.
questions are there from students, you can please ask, or you can unmute your mic and you can ask, or if you want you can write that in the chat box.
Or can I stop sharing?
Yes, you can stop sharing.
Mhm.
Anybody having any questions, please ask. Any person here among students wants to pursue GRE, please you can raise hand, or you can write yes, or anybody wants any guidance in GRE or other thing. Anybody wants to pursue masters MS? Ganesh Bagalkoti, can you please unmute and ask if you have any okay, you have left the meeting.
Mhm.
That's a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I perfectly understand if you guys haven't made up your mind yet because even I decided to do masters after I finished graduating and I was like, oh, what do I do now? So, yeah, it's perfectly understandable. Take your time. But if any of you guys have questions right now, please feel free to shoot.
Kaushik, any specific questions in the field of electrical vehicle and all, industry related projects or something?
Yes, sir. I have a question regarding like masters. So I just want to know like how much time would it take for an Indian engineering student to prepare for GRE?
Oh, I spent 3 weeks preparing for GRE and I got like 311 out of 340. But yeah, definitely, like to be on the safer side, I would say 1.5 month is good. If you like the math in GRE is not that complicated at all. I think your main challenge would be understanding the English questions or the English comprehension questions. So make sure you do a lot of practice tests, but I don't think it should take more than like 1.5 months if you do it sincerely, like
Hmm.
every single day.
Yeah, and let's say like if we are preparing for GATE, then what are the chances of getting selected in GRE? Because GATE focuses totally on technical aspects, and GRE is focusing more on vocabulary and all. So if a student is preparing for GATE, then what are his
Mhm.
chances of like cracking GRE? Like will GATE preparation suffice the preparation for GRE, or
No,
GRE demands something
they are
more?
totally different. They are totally different, Kaushik.
Yes, I mean, GATE might help you with the more quantitative part of GRE, which is the math part, but it won't help you at all in the comprehension, the English comprehension part, because even though you're still doing a little bit of English for GATE, but English in GRE, it's totally different. It's a much higher level, and you definitely need more time understanding. It's not what we did in school where you have to like, even though you have to read passages and answer questions, but the options itself, they are so tricky that you're bound to get confused. So I wouldn't say that preparing for GATE will guarantee your chance of getting good score in GRE. It is, you definitely have to put like some effort into your comprehension. But yeah, I think it may help you in the math part of it.
Well, I have a question for students
Mhm.
only. You have done your MS from a prestigious institute in US, and you know many of your friends are doing masters in India as well. So how
Mhm.
is it different in US, and why should a student from a city like Belgaum should go for masters in US?
Okay. Good question, actually. I was also talking to a couple of my friends who are doing masters in India, and one of the things I noticed was like even he was doing his thesis, and we were actually exchanging notes for a defense. And I was asking, oh, like, what is the kind of what is your novelty? How is your research original? And he said that there is no such thing. You just have to go present your work in front of a committee, and that would be it. But not just, it's not just the novel part of it. The thesis I did was actually, in tandem with a company. It's actually for a company which took this particular contract from the US Department of Energy, and you get to work on very real projects over here, whereas it's much more difficult to do that in India. He was trying to like try to do the same thing, but it kind of unfortunately did not work out. And at the same time, there is a lot more focus over here on working rather than just getting a good CGPA. A good CGPA does matter, but it's a lot more application oriented coursework, I would say. And that's where the whole difference I can see is, because here even why do a lot of people don't do bachelors, like masters over here? A lot of US people do not do masters. That is because they already studied so much in bachelors that they don't need it. So they already drill you in so much, but yeah, they are already industry ready when they get out of college, which is not what at least I was when I got out of college in Mumbai.
Okay. Yeah, Harshvardhan, please ask. Unmute yourself and ask.
I had a query like we are not there are so many students like me myself that we are not yet sure of doing a master's or just continuing to the industry directly after our bachelor's degree.
Hmm.
So what's the difference if we take a job right now, if we get a good job from the campus itself and we continue with the job, and after a while we go for our master's degree, and if we directly go after a bachelor's to the master's, what's the difference exactly?
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Good question. Is it understood, Sanskrita, what he has asked?
Yeah, he's asking if you like get experience and then do masters, or like, or directly jump from bachelor's to masters, right?
Correct. Thank
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
Yes, please.
Yes. So it depends. A lot of people think that I will gain experience 2 years in India. It will count, and then I will come and do masters over here. But the experience that you get in India does not matter. They do not care if you have work experience in India. What matters is what kind of work experience you have here in the US. So, but I've seen a lot of my friends complain that they are not able to keep up with curriculum after they took a break. They went into the industry and then they went to do their masters. They find it a lot more difficult to, remember all those formulas, keep up with the syllabus. It's much easier to jump into masters right after you've done your bachelor's. But if you want like just to learn and get to know how the industry is, or rather get to know yourself, then yeah, definitely I would say like get experience, because what happens sometimes is you don't know what you want to do. So that is where the industry experience come into picture. Once you work in this industry, you at least have an idea that okay, this is something I want to do, or this is something I don't want to do. Then based on that you can decide in which field you want to do your masters in. A lot of people use masters as a career change also. Like a lot of people from who did electrical engineering are actually now doing information systems, like business analysis, or like straight up just software engineering and masters. So if you want to change tracks, if you don't know what you're good at, then I would say get an experience and then decide what you want to do your masters in. But if you already know what you want to do, then jump right in.
Correct. That's very well said. About battery management system, can you suggest some projects that the students can do? If you have links and all these things, will it be possible to share?
Yes, I put, I think, one of the battery modeling projects in that. But If there are more projects related to it, I'll try to look up some more online. But some simple projects I would say would be trying to build an electrical equivalent battery model, like electrical equivalent circuit of the battery. So
Correct.
yeah, it is relatively simple, but not simple enough to achieve it in a day. So
No, that's okay because these students they have come to college after almost one more year, and
mm,
they're in a good nick. And battery management system, I think it's a very flourishing field, and it will be another 5-10 years. There will be a lot of scope of research in this. So many of these students can take battery management system and modeling as their future either master degree research project, or maybe in their job field also they can take it as a challenge. So if some
mm.
guidance comes from you through websites and all, I will definitely share it with them. So
Yes, sir.
I
If they
think
want
that is
to
fine.
reach out to me also, I
Yes, I
can.
will.
You can share my email ID with the
I
students.
will share. Yeah, you can. You can put it in.
Okay,
You can put it
I
in
can
the
put in
chat
it.
box. Yeah.
Mr. Ashit is asking if there is an age limit for masters. No, there is absolutely no age limit. In fact, people do like bachelors over here after having kids and all, which was a kind of culture shock for me. I was like, oh my god, you already have a kid and now you're coming to do bachelors. So yeah, that kind of what to say, like the mindset is very different over here, and there is definitely no age limit. In my lab, the lab I was working in, there was a man who was like 60 years old, and now he's doing his masters, and we did our thesis like in the same like duration. So yeah, there is no age limit. Yeah, I'm
What
just
about?
going to put.
Yeah, please put. My question is, what about financial assistance? And many of the students are worried about financial things. So, how is it that they self finance? They get some loan, self finance, then they get some job there, come back to
Mhm.
India and repay for it. So, if you have any idea about that, please
Okay.
enlighten us.
So, so I would suggest going for like assistantship. Like I started doing my research assistantship under my defense professor, and because of that, my entire second year's tuition fee was I don't know,
Waived.
forgiven. Like I did not have to pay any tuition fees. So, but I got the assistantship after I came and I worked for him for like a semester and a half, and that is how I got it. But there are a lot of cases of students who get these research assistantship or teaching assistantship even before they come for their masters, which is 100% like perfect. Those kind of people, they don't even have to pay anything for the entire 2 years of their master.
And
And
what preparation our students have to do, or what kind of capacities they should develop so that they would be getting this scholarships from the beginning itself.
if they want scholarships, then they need a good GRE score, a good GRE score. Like if you want a scholarship, then it is almost like 330 out of 340 in GRE. So that's what you need for scholarships at least. But if you want like assistantship, then start talking to the professor even before you come over here. Like you mail them and tell them, oh, I've already like registered for your class and I'm interested in working under you. Professors want students to work under them because they are getting all these like good contracts from the industry. So they want someone to work and realize the project as well. So tell them that you're willing to work on a project. If they can assist you with getting a TA or a RA, they are definitely more than happy to help you with it. So you can reach out to them and see what are your options when it comes to getting financial aid from the university. I would say, it's not worth it. You're paying all these like hundreds of like thousands of dollars every single year. because a lot of these universities absolutely have the capacity to fund you. So make sure you are reaching out to them and getting your what to say, academics or a profile right, so that you can get these aids.
So what kind of proficiency students are supposed to develop when they're trying to get some assistantship? Like I know MATLAB very well. Anything given to me, I can solve by MATLAB. So something like this, do you think will help? So what kind of proficiencies professors are looking for generally?
Usually for teaching assistantship, they want someone whose like basic concepts and foundation is very clear, because a lot of the teaching assistantships, they are mostly for PhD students, but master
Correct.
students can get it as well. But you have to prove that your concepts are golden. Your foundation is absolutely strong. So that only then they can give you a teaching assistantship. But for research assistantship, you don't need anything like that. For research assistantship, you can tell the professor that, oh, these are the projects I have done in the past. This is my skill set. This is what I can do. They definitely give you time to learn. They don't expect you to get everything 100% or know 100% on the first day itself. So, but if you tell them what you want, then they can put you on like projects where you're a good fit at. So, yeah, it's basically like you develop your skill sets right now, and that time you go and tell them, this is what I did, and they will help you take it further from there.
So all this extra NPTEL course and other certified courses and all which we do in India, the students actually NPTEL course and all these things are there in their curriculum. At the end of the semester, they have to submit a certificate. So these things will matter, right? That shows their theoretical knowledge and proficiency. Will it matter?
It will definitely help them clear their concepts, but the certificate itself won't matter. But yeah, if it helps in strengthening their concepts,
Correct.
then yeah, sure. What matters more is what kind of projects you implement. So,
Mhm.
and if you are able to answer questions related to that, then it is fine. So,
Yes, yes, correct. Got it. Any students, any other questions? So Sanskruta has shared her email ID in the chat box. You can just find out. So for internships in India and for any guidance in study abroad for MS GRE related things, you can contact her. If you are having any questions, please ask now. Raise your hand.
mm, yeah, I think they just want to go because it's already extended more than the time limit. But yeah, I'll try to answer like questions as quick as possible. So if
No,
you guys have
already
any more questions.
you have answered many. It was a uh,
Mhm.
very good session, and I would like to tell you all that she was in college. She had done undergraduate course in electronics. So at that time, I was also there in VIT, and Sanskruta had done her B project also under me, but that was not in this field. Okay, whatever field she has chosen, control system, she has chosen it after her engineering, and she had given time to know herself, and then she had gone for masters. So that 1 year, I guess, it was very helpful. So same thing
Yeah.
told to you students. If you are getting a campus interview and all, job and all, if you get, it's okay. Even if you don't get it, don't get disheartened. So give time to know yourself, give time to weigh your options, know the market, and then you can join. Okay,
Mhm.
so I think that's that for today. Thank you a lot from Electronics and Communication Department of GIT as well as from the GIT itself. I thank you a lot for coming and enlightening us in the field of your research. And in
No, it
future
was a
also,
fun session. Thank you so much for having me.
thank you. So, in future also, we would like to have some of your expertise in our this EHV class, that is electrical and hybrid vehicle. But that time it will be more technical, and whatever thing you can share with us in technical field, it will definitely help the students.
Yes,
Thank you,
absolutely.
Sanskruta. Yep.
Mm.
So the students might trouble you with emails and all because you have given your email. That's very generous. So
Mhm.
if whenever they do that, please help them out. Okay.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Yes. So shall we call it for day? Any
Yes.
student, any questions now?
Mhm.
Thank you, thank you. So it's I think it's more than midnight at your place.
Yeah, it's fine over here. I want to thank all the students also for coming and listening to me because it's a holiday and I appreciate all of you all being over here. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. See you soon. See you again.
Mhm.
Bye. So all
Have a good
students,
day, guys.
yeah, good day. Thank you,
Mhm.
Sanskrita. We'll leave the
Thank
meeting
you,
now.
sir.
Yeah. Bye. Good day.